Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this exciting session to learn more about animations. I want to get to know all of you a little better. So let me know in the comments section where you are joining in from and what is your favorite all time TV show or a movie. So I'll go first. So I'm currently joining in from Illinois, USA. And my favorite TV show of all time is Big Bang Theory. I mean, I can watch they all day and every day. Let me know in the comments what your favorite TV show is. Friends. Oh, I love Friends as well. That is my second best choice. Awesome. Great. So, before we begin, I want to remind everyone that you can post any questions you have throughout the session in the comments section. We'll go through all the questions during the Q&A. Before we start the session, I wanted to wish all of you a happy International Women's Day. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, and may we raise them. My name is Arva Lokhandwala, and I am the Lottie Community Organizer for Illinois, USA. Why this community? I've always believed that one picture is worth 1,000 words, and one animation is worth over 5,000. The main aim of this community is to educate as many people as possible on how to leverage the power of motion to share their ideas across in the world in this digital era. And if you're already in love with animations, then we'll show you how to leverage Lottie to make your animations faster, smaller, and smoother. Our community prides itself on being an inclusive environment where everyone and anyone interested in motion are welcome to join. Now, what is LottieFiles? LottieFiles is a platform for testing, collaborating, and discovering animations for a community of designers and developers. The platform offers a range of tools and features that aim to make the discovery, creation, and implementation of Lottie animations easier and more efficient. To give you an even better idea, here is an intro video to what LottieFiles is all about. Enjoy!
I've got a big fat drum, big fat drum. I've got a big fat drum, pounding so bad. I've got a big fat drum, big fat drum. I've got a big fat, big.
Listen. Yeah. Clap. You ready? Let's go.
Wow, that was exciting. Now that we know a lot more about LottieFiles, where can we use LottieFiles? So LottieFiles can be used for a lot of different things like in-app animations, presentations, social media. My favorite one is using LottieFiles in AR and VR. Now, who uses LottieFiles, right? I've told you a lot about what LottieFiles is, what Lottie is. There are a lot of companies who use LottieFiles. There are over 130,000 plus companies, and these companies include like Disney, Google, Apple, Starbucks, and even Bank of America. Now, without any further ado, I would like you guys to meet our speaker, Alex Bradt. Hey, Alex. Hey, welcome. We are very excited to have you. Would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. I'm a huge fan of Lottie. My name is Alex Bradt. I am an animator. I currently own a studio called Mousepack. We create augmented reality, but we also do interactive projects using Lottie for apps with some of the companies that you actually showed in the last slide. So
Wow,
just a little, yeah, go ahead.
that is exciting.
Yeah, thank you. I can give a little background on sort of my journey and how I got to where I am. I started out doing motion design, self-taught, just learning on YouTube how to do basic little animations to tell stories, and fell in love with the idea of being able to do anything and not having to worry about getting a bunch of friends together and filming and getting a script together. And instead, my imagination was my limits. I can strap a jetpack to a turtle and send it to the moon. So from there, I worked in a few tech companies after freelancing for a little bit. Some of them included LinkedIn, Snapchat, Google. And a lot of that is where I was able to really practice and hone my animation skills.
Wow. I mean, your experience is amazing. I mean, everyone over here who has joined, we are actually lucky to have you as a speaker, and the stage is all yours.
Great. Awesome. Yeah. So as we mentioned, I've been doing animation for about 10 years now. I've currently more of a creative director. I, again, run a studio called Mousepack. Most of that is augmented reality. I'll show you some of that later. But yeah, I figured I'd just go ahead and show you some of my Lottie files here, so you can kind of see what I'll be going over today. This is one of my favorites. It's called Unlikely Friends, and it's a story about a little jellyfish who isn't afraid of people based on the way they look, and instead chooses to be an optimist and friendly. And often I try to be that jellyfish. You can see there's a lot of fun little animations going on in this sequence that I'll be going over today. So I'll give a little bit of more of a breakdown exactly into that. But yeah, I've had a lot of fun animating these. Some of these are for tech companies that you know, and some are just for fun. And some are just dancing dinosaurs. If you want to download any of these files, you're welcome to. They're public on Lottie. If you go to LottieFiles.com/Alex Bradt, you can go ahead and download any of these and try them out for yourself. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a different tab. This is my 2D portfolio tab. And yeah, this is where I took a lot of the examples that I'll be showing you. Some of them I do 3D as well, but the principles that I'm going to be teaching today transfer across. One thing I noticed on LottieFiles and just animation in general on the internet is that a lot of people are very good at design and bringing a little bit of life to those designs in After Effects. But there are a few basic principles that I've been noticing a little bit of a lack of. And these principles are things that people used to go to school for many years, for many long hours, scraping away, drawing pencil sketches and having them critiqued to really hone and learn the craft of animation. A lot of people today are a bit more self-taught, such as myself. But it's still good to understand what those principles are and understand how those fundamentals can shape your animation and make it look alive. Of course, things like I'll show you today, like a pineapple bouncing around a little flame character playing a guitar, is not realistic. You don't see that happen every day. However, what is realistic is the way that it squashes and stretches, the way that the characters interact, the way the little overshoot and the motion, and all of those little details that add to the animation and make it feel alive. On a more motion graphic side of things, less character animation, you can see this is something I did for Snapchat, where those same principles that you can apply to a character can be applied to something like a little explainer video explaining how an app downloads. And maybe you can find something in the middle where maybe your character isn't really a character at all, and it's more a conglomeration of shapes. So there's a lot of fun that we can do with it, and there's a lot of different ways that we can use animation. But what I really want to hone in today is that no matter what you're creating, animation principles carry through all of it. And it's kind of like riding a bike. Once you understand how to do it, you can apply it to anything. So without further ado, I'm actually going to hop into After Effects. And I'm going to show you, again, some of these breakdowns. I would encourage, I see some lovely people in the audience already. I love Phineas and Ferb as well. So shout out to that. But please, please, please ask me questions during this session. I am happy to answer any. It can be related to animation in general, the fundamentals. It can be questions about the industry, how to break in, or it can just be a hello. But any questions that are going on, I have the comments on the side here, so feel free to shoot them away and I'll answer them as I see them. So I'm going to go ahead and share my After Effects screen. We'll get started. So today, I want to show you this book. I'm going to be showing you some principles that are broken down in this book here. I actually have it on my shelf over here, but any animation studio has one of these. And not only do they have it, but it's torn through. What this is it's called the Animator's Survival Kit. And it's pretty much the Bible for animation. Anything in here, anything you need to know about animation goes on within these pages. If you want to know how to make a character run, it's in here. If you want to know how to make an arrow shoot into a piece of wood and jiggle around, if you want to make a horse animate, it's all in this book. I actually have a few different tabs on this book that I go to often, such as a head turn, a walk cycle, jumping. So this book is the source. So I highly recommend anyone who is interested in getting into animation, just purchasing this book. It's full of pictures. It's pretty much 100% pictures. So how can you go wrong with that? There's also a wonderful iPad app with the same name called the Animator Survival Kit. And I personally prefer the book. However, most people prefer the app, mainly because you can scrub through animations. The author of the book, Richard Williams, who animated Who Framed Roger Rabbit, actually has video presentations in the app. And he kind of brings you through all the principles. So what I want to show you today are first, I want to explain squash and stretch. And then next, I'm going to show smear frames, or as the book calls them, the elongated in-between. Both of these principles together add a lot of motion, add a lot of life, and just add a lot of value to your animations. But again, these principles are not just for 2D animation. I'll show you a few. These are just a few examples. I just wanted an excuse to show some AR, since that's where I've been focusing. But a lot of the animations that we see in real life fall into the same principles. We'll show more of those later. So the first thing I want to show is squash and stretch. So here's the little pufferfish character that I have here. And if I just play this animation, we can watch what happens when it hits the wall here. So it goes back, hits the wall. And if you take a look, watch the way that the body contorts. When it hits, it squishes. You can also see that a little less exaggerated, but in this character here I have in 3D, we can watch that when he jumps, his body, look at his eyes. His eyes become more wide ovals. And if you look when he lands, they become a little more squashed. So this is squash, stretch, and those together add for a cute little lively animation. So going into the book here, the example that they use, and it's sort of the first lesson in any animator's curriculum, is the bouncing ball. So a bouncing ball is a perfect example of squash and stretch. If we think about the way that it arcs and it comes down, once it's hitting that gravity and that terminal velocity, it begins to change shape. It begins to deform. When it hits the bottom, it compresses, widens out, and then shoots up and repeats that pattern. This happens with anything, even a bowling ball, as surprising as that might seem. Everything in life has a little bit of squash and stretch. And you can see it in life. It's not super easy to see it in every single thing because a lot of things are very rigid. But if you want to record a golf ball, set down a tripod, drop a golf ball, you'll be able to see it do exactly this. So how do we put that into a character? So this is Amy. Amy is a pineapple that I made for Google for Firebase. And Amy is happy because she gets to bounce up and down. She's super stoked. Everything's happy. Everything's great. Now, if we watch, when Amy hits the ground, she begins to compress. And it looks weird if we go frame by frame. This doesn't look quite like the design in the same way that this does. But when she hits the ground, she compresses and launches into the air. We can see that with here. I used the same animation again where Amy is excited to hop around this character and have a fun time. So how does one create that? Well, I have an example here, pre-created. And again, I'm going to go through this live, but I would love for any questions, any comments during this presentation. If you want to know what I did and how I did something, if I went through something too fast, please feel free to say anything, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So these down here are called keyframes. Each keyframe refers to a property that is given to each one of the objects here. So I'll start very simply first before we get into that example. I'm just going to go up here and make a box on my screen. And I have this little plugin here that helps me center my anchor points. If you don't have that, you can just click this pan behind tool. But an anchor point is where the animation will move from. So if I have the anchor point right in the center, it will rotate from the center. However, if I put the anchor point down on the bottom, it will then rotate from that point. So the simplest way to do this would be to do a quick, let's say I want to kind of do something similar to what Amy did here, where she jumps up in the air and she's excited, and then she lands, squishes, and then jumps. So obviously there's a lot going on with her hair. There's her eyes, her mouth, etc., textures, but I'm going to show you how to do that with a basic box. And let me show you what the final product is going to look like before I get into it. So we see that squash and stretch, right? The box compresses and then launches into the air. And then when it comes back down, it stretches again, squishes, and gives a little bounce. So if I were doing this just very basically, I would set a keyframe for the position. I would launch this box up in the air. And what I'm doing here is I'm just changing the position. You can change the position to anywhere you want, and it will move to that position. So if I'm going to throw this box straight up in the air, let's put it right here, and then let's have it come back down. So this doesn't look very lively, right? That doesn't look like how Amy was moving at all. There's only 3 keyframes here, but it's going up, it's hitting the top, and then it's coming down. But as you can see, with no squash and stretch, it's very boring. Even if I were to throw some easing on this, which what easing does is it takes, these are what the keyframes, the animation keyframes look like. See how they're very jagged lines? If I were to go in here and add easing, it would make those lines of animation very smooth. So this looks cool, but I don't know about you, but I have never seen a box levitate like that in real life. So it's not realistic. It might work if you're doing some sort of app animation where you have some little floaty object that moves up and down. But what I'm here to tell you is there's a better way. And it's not incredibly difficult to pull it off. So again, this is what we're trying to make. Squash, stretch. So think about matter and how nothing can be created nor destroyed. That's the principle that goes into the way that the box squashes and stretches. And what I mean by that is that when it compresses down, not only does it get wider, but it gets thinner, because all of the energy, all of the mass is pushing into that. So let's try to emulate that. Let's take, I'm going to go to S for scale, and I'm going to uncheck this link. This link will just make sure that both the X and Y scale at the same time, but that's not what I want. I want them to function independently of one another. So I'm going to set my first keyframe at 100, 100. I'm going to move forward in time. I'm going to set another keyframe. And then I'm going to reduce the size. But again, this is not a natural squash, because where is the mass going? It's disappearing into the void. So instead, I want this, yes, the height to go down, but I also want it to get wider, because that is where the energy would be going. So now I have my squash, but now I need it to stretch. So I'm going to have it squash all the way down. I'm going to add a nice long squash. And then once it hits this bottom point here, I want it to leap forward, leap up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy my first keyframe, Control Z, Control V. Then I'm going to take my position, P for position. And if I click on this layer here and click U, it will show both my keyframes together. So I'm going to take my position. I'm going to launch this box straight up into the air. Woo! Right? So it's getting the lift off, and then it shoots up. There's a lot of fine tuning that goes into this, so apologies if this is not perfect while I'm making it. A lot of animation is refinement, but I want to get the principles behind here. So when you get the stretch, you want that to happen when the object is moving at its fastest. So I'm going to do that around here. Now, a stretch is the opposite of a squash. So if it's going down and getting thicker, wider on the outside, and shorter on the top, I want to make it thin and long. So here's thin, here's long. So it goes down, shoots up, shoot. And then once it gets to the top, it's not going to be moving as fast once it's at the top. So I want it to go back to its original shape. So I'm going to go ahead, copy and paste the first keyframe at 100, 100. And then let's look at that. So we're getting somewhere. Again, not perfect quite yet, but it's definitely getting somewhere. So let's have this animation get all the way to the top. Let's have it go up for just a little bit longer so that it has a nice little hang time here. And then I want it to drop back down real fast. Back to its original position. So you can see when it hits, this is very unnatural. It just stops. Nothing just stops. Everything always has some sort of secondary animation to it, or a little bit of give, a little bit of pulsation, something to make it feel a little bit more alive. So that's what we're going to give it with our squash again. Well, let's do our stretch first, actually. So the good news is we already created the keyframe, so I can just go ahead and copy this one. And again, terminal velocity is around here. And it hits. And once it hits, we want it to squash. Bam. Probably space these out a little bit. But I don't want it to just go back to its original shape. I want it to hit the ground and splat. Splat. Then I'm going to go back to my original shape. Let's watch that. So see how it already feels like super cartoony? There's a lot I can do here, obviously, to make it feel a little bit more realistic. But look how much life was just added for a few extra keyframes. It already feels like a cartoon. It feels like it's something that you would see in Phineas and Ferb or in Looney Tunes. It's that extra extravagance, the taking what we see in life and expanding it and making it a little bit more surreal. So we can go ahead even further here. So when it squashes and it goes right back to its original shape, I want it to settle into this shape. I don't want it to just land here and stop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually copy and paste this 100 keyframe 2 more times, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to have it go down, and then instead of going straight into its normal position here, if we take a look at the Animator Survival Guide, you'll see that over time, the ball gets less compact. Actually, this isn't a great example of it, so I'll just show you. We're going to have it settle into place. So when it hits this here, it squishes down and it's going up. So I'm gonna add another stretch, but this one's gonna be a little bit more subtle than the other one. So stretch. And then again, I'm gonna go back to squash, but again, not as crazy as the other one because this isn't taking off. This is just settling into place. And let's watch this. Look at that. Look at that little jelly boy hopping around. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions. If anybody has any questions at all about how to add this to a character or how this applies to animations, happy to hop on and answer any questions that you have. Feel free to leave them in the comment section and I'll be able to answer them. So that's the first principle. And again, we can see that here, the jellyfish, or sorry, the pufferfish. When he hits the object, he gives that little compression and stretches upwards. We can see that in my little character Bowie, where Bowie hops up in the air, stretches. It's very mild, but it still does the job. So it goes down, stretches, squashes. And then again with Amy, she compresses and then launches into the air. The next principle I'm going to show you is called smear or schmear. I think it's just smear, but I'm going to show you what that means. You've probably seen it before without realizing it. And I'm doing this all in After Effects just so we don't have to keep switching screens. But this is in the animation survival guide, survival kit, but it's also something that you can look up at any point. Just typing in elongated in between, anything of that nature. But look at these weird frames. Has anyone ever seen these before? Because I promise you have without even realizing it. Here's Bugs Bunny. Last time I checked, that's not what Bugs Bunny looks like. However, anything is possible with a smear frame. So that's what he looks like. Who else? A little more modern. SpongeBob. Anybody know SpongeBob? Little yellow guy. Lives at the bottom of the sea. This one's a little bit different because it's not stretching his object as much as it's adding a bunch of them together. But what this is doing and what this is accomplishing is very fast motion. It gives the illusion of motion blur. If you take a look at my camera right here, obviously if I move very slow, you can see my hand on screen. However, if I move it fast, you see how it turns into one object? Look, if I wave, shoo, 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 shoo. See that? That's what we're trying to emulate. It's all based in reality. I'm going to show you some examples of this. So I have these little characters here. And I'm just gonna loop this. And I want you to pay close attention specifically to the little avocado pit. Watch the eyes. I know the frame rate isn't super fast, but if you take a look at the eyes, there's a quick motion happening. And I'm going to go frame by frame to show you what that is. Look at this. It's horrendous. That's not what eyeballs look like. But I bet you didn't even notice. I also bet you didn't even notice this, which is a terrifying image. It only lasts for 1 frame. But those 2 frames add so much life. Important to note, too, that this is with squash and stretch as well. So let's watch that again. Great. Going to show you this on another example of mine. I don't do a ton of frame-by-frame animation, but I did this one as a test. And it was the last one I ever did because it took me so gosh dang long. But let's watch this bunny, shall we? Boing, boing, boing. It's got hops, right? Mad hops. So I bet you didn't even notice. But look at this. Look at that. Terrifying. Look at that. Big, stretchy bunny. And again, when the bunny lands, it looks like this. This is a good example of squash as well. But let's watch that again. So it gives a good sense of motion right here at the end when it hits that terminal velocity. That's what we're trying to accomplish. So I'm going to show you how to do that with keyframes. I see there's a question. What are the steps for you to come up with a story for your animation? Thanks for asking. I'll get into smear frames in a second. As far as the story goes, it's something I just love to doodle. And again, sky's the limit. I'm sure a lot of people think about what ifs and what if a cow had a jetpack and what if, et cetera, et cetera. They kind of populate in my brain of a character that I want to do. So maybe I think it would be fun to animate a rabbit. And then I think about, what do rabbits do? Rabbits eat grass. Rabbits don't lay eggs, but you can do that. What does my rabbit do? Maybe my rabbit just bounces across the screen. It's not necessarily a story, but it's a way to show this character's life and show the way that this character goes about its day. Another example would be just these little avocado pits. I thought of just the idea would be funny if there was an avocado in the pit and they were friends. This was actually for Snapchat. We were doing a campaign around real friends. So we're thinking about what would be funny to show as two little characters that would give each other a high five. And I thought of an avocado and an avocado pit. And what's a good way to show friendship with a high five? So again, this smear right here shows motion. And it's actually pretty simple to do. I'm going to show you it, and then I will show you how to make your own. So here's the box. I'm going to show what this box looks like without and then with. So it's already looking pretty fast. I went ahead and made these keyframes, and I'll recreate this. I added easy easing. I made it go slow and then fast at the end. Might even want to crank that a little bit more. So it's already moving pretty quick. But if I add a smear frame, it's going to give that sense of motion blur and make it feel like it's going even faster to that location. So what this is is literally just a box that appears for one frame. That's all it is. Doesn't animate, doesn't have any keyframes. It's just a box on screen. See that again here. I'm going to show this with a circle. But this is what the smear frame is right now. I'm just showing you ahead of time. Need to mess with the keyframes here to make this make a little bit more sense. This one's not as good of an example, but if I had more time, I promise it would look amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do this box example here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a small box. I'm going to set the anchor point straight to the middle. I'm going to name it box. I'm going to do P for position. What we're going to be using here. Move forward in time. Just move it right across the screen. Right? So this is pretty boring, but it's doing its job. I'm going to go ahead and add some easy easing. I'm going to click this little graph button and see what that looks like here. This shows you, the graph shows you the speed. So this ramp is ramping up, and at the peak here is where it's at its fastest. So we can go ahead and just make that just like that. Again, the same principles with squash and stretch is that nothing ever stops. I'm never giving someone a high five and just even that, like you can see it goes forward a little bit, bounces back, right? You can barely see it, but I promise that's how life works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead a few frames. I'm going to add a little bit of what's called overshoot, which is a whole other principle for another day, where it just moves forward a little bit. So let's actually move this one forward a little bit. Let's move this one back. Sometimes it adds these little extra lines here, and it makes your object go further than it does. A good way around that is if you just click this tool up here, the Convert Vertex tool. Just click on that. It'll make it go away. But now, see that little extra bump right there adds a little extra life to it. So now to add my smear frame. What a smear frame is it's supposed to be this object here, just moving really quickly. So think about the principles that I mentioned earlier of squash and stretch, but let's just imagine that there was a really quick line that moved across the screen. So what we want to do is we want to line this box up. We want to make sure it's the same shape. And we want to go where that box ends its terminal velocity. So I'm going to put that right here. I'm going to line it up. I'm clicking T here for transparency so I can see the difference here. But I'm going to slide that up all the way to 100. I hold Alt or Option and the bracket keys. I can cut this frame. You can also just drag it out on the ends here. And then let's see what this looks like. If you're doing it right, no one should even notice it. But if you look here, we just added a whole bunch of velocity with literally just an extra shape on top. And what's cool about this is that because we're at a Lottie workshop, I'm going to show you how to export this bad boy. So you see I have my LottieFiles plugin up here. If you download it, it'll be Windows extension LottieFiles. And you can see I clicked one button and it's already rendered and ready to go. And now if I click upload, and then I click this little web button, I'm going to share this other tab instead to just show you LottieFiles really quickly. Cool. Now I have this little animation in my editor. And I can go ahead, change the background, do whatever I want. I can go ahead and link this, send it to my developer, and have them put it directly into my app. So, anyways, that's the presentation. I see there's a few questions in the Q&A. This is the Q&A section dedicated for that. Hi, Arwa. Welcome back. How'd I do?
Hi, Alex. The session was like entertaining and educating. I've never enjoyed a session more.
Awesome.
It was so much fun. The animations are like so amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the cool thing is that anyone can do it. We are in the best time for someone to get into animation. We have tools that are accessible and easy. LottieFiles has opened up a whole new market that was never available for someone like me until very recently. For a long time, to do animations inside an app, you had to be a very specific type of developer that can animate each one of the parameters that I showed you in there in strings of code. But now we can do them with keyframes, and making animations with keyframes is the way that animators do things. It's a visual coding language that allows us to very quickly add life and add motion. So the fact that we can take things from After Effects and import them directly into apps is incredible.
I can imagine. I mean, it gives you a lot of power, right, to get your idea across. If you learn how to animate anything, I think so you don't need to speak anymore. You can just show the animation for everything.
Yeah, exactly. I think what's cool about animations, and then I'll answer some questions here, is that it's not just a tool for advertising. It's a way to communicate.
Yes.
I think that's something that I found in my life, is that I necessarily wasn't the best one at school. I wasn't necessarily the best person at sitting down and writing essays. However, what I was good at was telling stories visually. And with the power of motion, I can communicate arguably way more than an article or a paper can in a very short amount of time if I do it correctly.
And plus, people would pay attention, right? Our attention span is anyways limited. So this is like a very good way to, yeah, completely agree. And we have a lot of amazing questions as well in our comment section. So let's tackle them. Alex, are you up for it?
Yeah, sure. Why don't you go ahead and grab one here? I see. What other softwares do you use apart from AE? So that's a great question. I actually barely use After Effects nowadays. I know I'm a fraud. You outed me. But nowadays, a lot of my programs, I use Cinema 4D. Lens Studio is Snapchat's AR program. There's Spark AR. Again, these fundamentals are not specifically for a program. And I think that's important to note, is that these fundamentals can be transferred to any type of animation software, whether that's 2D or 3D. If you are getting into 2D animation, I highly recommend After Effects. It's the simplest to use. It's industry standard. Pretty much any company uses After Effects as far as for motion graphics purposes. If you want to learn 3D, which I know is not quite what we're talking about today, I would recommend downloading Blender. Blender is a free 3D software. It's open source and it's incredible. And they also do have some 2D in there as well. But other than that, I use Google Slides all the time because I own a studio. I'm constantly pitching ideas to companies. And what a pitch is it's pretty much making some examples, making some animations, and then going ahead and showing them. I actually just did a pitch for Netflix. And what we did is we went ahead and made some quick little examples of what the animations might look like. And then I rendered them out. And then I put them into the Google Slides deck so that they can see it visually. So the programs that I use is pretty much any program that can get my story across, that can tell the animation that I'm trying to tell the simplest. And then what is my favorite? I don't have a favorite. I mean, After Effects I've used the longest just because that's where I got the start of my career, was through motion graphics. So a lot of love for After Effects. See, Adrian asked a question about inspirations. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question because I think inspirations come from a few different places. If you're looking for straight design inspirations and you want to see how someone else has done a good animation, I recommend Dribble.com. That's Dribble with 3 B's, DRIBBBLE.com. It's a fantastic collection of animations from all sorts of people around the entire world, and they're very short form content, very short shareable GIFs. So I really recommend going there to see how people have animated, and you could even download the GIFs and scrub through them in After Effects and kind of understand and sort of dissect how they did it. Where I draw inspiration from, I don't want to get too wooey and artsy, but life. I like to take a lot of time away from the computer. I specifically, I live in New York City. I love walking around the streets here and just seeing all sorts of weird stuff. I just saw someone walking a pig the other day. A hawk ate a pigeon in my backyard today. That was weird. But like all sorts of things, the more that you can put in front of yourself and the more that you see, it comes from. And even from like movies, like watching superhero movies and thinking like, oh, I can animate that character. I can show Captain America throwing a shield. Let me do it. And that's totally in your vein. There's no copyright laws that are going to sue you for making a Captain America GIF. Now, maybe if you start selling it, that might be a different issue. But there are no copyright laws for you to just make a Pokemon or make any sort of fan art that you want. And that's honestly where a lot of my early inspiration comes from, is Rick and Morty, Simpsons, SpongeBob, just kind of looking through and seeing how the greats did it. I see Anthony asked a question about, were you able to upload Lottie using the After Effects plugin? Yeah, it's great. I love Lottie. I'm here for a reason. I use the platform. I use it professionally, and it's polished, very polished. So you can go ahead, just type in Lottie After Effects plugin. You download it, plug straight in. And like I showed before, you can do it just literally, you click a button, click another button, and it's on the internet. Very simple. We haven't mentioned much about AR. Too much, but how do you use Lottie in AR? Where Lottie places into AR. So where Lottie places into AR, I think it's interesting because I think we're still figuring it out. I think AR in general, we're still figuring it out, right? So I can show, I think, actually, you had a good example of the whales earlier, right? I think that would be a good example. But if I wanted to show maybe my little box boys example, I'm going to share my screen again. Well, maybe not box boys, but let me, I'm going to share my screen one more time. Think about how that we can use 2D in a 3D setting. So for this Jenga thing here that I made, look at the way that the hand is moving, and you see like these little objects that are coming out of the hand. That can be a Lottie animation. You can come up with more sophisticated examples, but pretty much anytime you want to add some sort of 2D, you can add like some 2D explosion lines here coming out, or maybe even just just some extra life if you wanted to add some UI. You can see up here I have the little this little Box Boys is the name of this game that I created with a few friends. But you can see like there's a little life bar at the top and the little +1 that comes out here. Those are all things that we can do with Lottie.
Awesome. I can see we have answered almost all the questions from the comments section. We also have a couple of questions which were presented during the RSVP. So I want to ask those. The first one is, what is that one piece of advice you would give to people who are looking for a job in motion design?
I love this question. Love it. It's so simple to answer. You ready? Everybody want a job? Make stuff. Make things and put it on the internet. Just constantly be making, even if you think it's bad. Put it out there, and then put out another one, and then put out another one, and then another one, and then another one, and keep doing that. And if you actually care about this industry, you will find success in it. If you find passion in animation, you will find success in it if you keep doing it. A great book, I don't have it on my shelf over here. It's called Grit by Angela Duckworth. That's Grit. I think that's a fantastic book to read. And what that book pretty much goes into is the people, it's a study, it's proven, the people who succeed in a field are the ones that do it for the longest, and they stick with it, and they stick with what they're good at. And that's a principle that's been true since the dawn of time. So what I say for people who want to get into animation is put stuff out there, and then once you have a strong body of work, just don't be afraid to show it to people. Hey, what do you think? Hey, I'm a motion designer. Have any recommendations? Have any feedback for me? Hey, person, I saw that you're doing motion design. I also love doing motion design. Maybe we can work on a little project together. Be looking for people who are interested in it, but also just keep going.
I think so that advice is not only just applicable to animation, it is applicable to any skill or any industry you want to go in. Just keep on doing it. You will succeed definitely. There's another question. The last one. What is a bad motion graphics according to you?
Great. Let me show an example. No, I'm just kidding. I would say a bad motion graphics would be what I showed earlier, which is just a position when someone takes one keyframe and then another keyframe. I think there are times when that's appropriate, but I do think a lot of the times nothing ever stops. Nothing ever comes to a complete stop. Everything always goes forward and back a little bit. There's anticipation. I really recommend that people look into animation principles in general in that book that I showed earlier, because there's a lot of different principles that show that. So there's anticipation, there's overshoot, there's all sorts of fun stuff. But a bad motion graphics is when I see someone who animates an elbow and then it goes from here to here and that's it. It's not natural and it feels wrong, and you can't tell why, but it just feels off. And what it is it's nothing ever settles. Things always have a little bit of give and a little bit of take, and things stretch and squash. So the more that you can add that sort of realism to it, the more that it comes to life.
I think so. What I understand is You have to emulate it as close as possible to real life objects and not something which is like a stick man, for example. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What a lot of people do, what a lot of animators do, and if you look up breakdowns for even movies like Encanto or any Disney movie, even Spider-Man, a lot of times the animators will film themselves, and then they will bring it into their animation software and animate on top of it because they are trying to get as close to the reference as possible. You're trying to get as close to real life as possible. And again, if you want to see what a bouncing ball looks like, get a ball, film it, bounce it, animate on top of it, and I guarantee it's going to look great.
Yep, that's a great advice. That's a very good advice. And we are done with the Q&A. Thank you so much, Alex. We really enjoyed the session. Woo, woo. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So finally, we are at the end of the session. Remember to follow us on Instagram and YouTube to stay updated on our latest events. With that said, thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you again real soon. Bye, folks.